McChrystal in, he lost control of his Afghanistan policy. Obama had said that he wanted to narrow the goals, the U.S. goals in Afghanistan, very explicitly, where McChrystal's strategy was in fact exponentially widening our goals. So I think that to me was one of the key sort of factors and key tensions in the piece.
And McChrystal played a key role in trying to press for more troops for the second escalation that Obama did, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I know the White House was upset that look, Obama had already agreed last year, this is all sort of old news now, but agreed last year to send 21,000 more troops. Then all of a sudden McChrystal goes over there, says, oh, wait, we're losing, we need X number of more. And I know people in the White House believe that had undercut Obama's sort of authority and the strategic impact of the 21,000 they were already sending over.
That he leaked a report from the Pentagon saying they want 40,000 troops.
Right. Well, we know the report. We know the report was leaked. We don't know who leaked it, but I do know from my reporting that General McChrystal's staff, after initially like a 30-minute period where they were sort of unhappy by the leak, that they sort of embraced it. So this was not an isolated incident. Like Rolling Stone did not fire General McChrystal. The White House fired General McChrystal. And it was this moment where President Obama, this last week was a moment where President Obama was reasserting his control over the Afghanistan policy, or trying to reassert his control over the Afghanistan policy.
We're going to break and then come back to this very important discussion of what were the key issues raised in the Rolling Stone piece, the runaway general, that led to the firing of General McChrystal. This is Democracy Now! We're joined by the reporter who did this story. He's just back from Afghanistan, Michael Hastings. Stay with us.
There was a decorated general with a heart of gold that likened him to all the stories he told of past battles won and lost and legends of old. A seasoned veteran in his own time. On the battlefield he gained respectful fame, with many medals of bravery and stripes to his name. He grew a beard as soon as he could to cover the scars on his face, and always urged his men on. But on the eve of a great battle with the infantry and dream, the old general tossed in his sleep and wrestled with its meaning. He awoke from the night to tell what he had seen, and walked slowly out of his tent. All the men held tall with their chests in the air, with the courage in their blood and a fire in their stare. And it was a great morning and they all wondered how they would fare. So the old general told them to go home. He said, I have seen the others, and I have discovered that this fight is not worth fighting. And I've seen their mothers.
The General by Dispatch. Here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. In a rare extended interview, we're joined by Michael Hastings, the Rolling Stone reporter who wrote that piece, The Runaway General, that led to the firing of General Stanley McChrystal. Now, General Petraues has been unanimously confirmed to replace him as the head of the Afghan war. Continuing on the question that Juan asked you, the key points in your piece and this division between the military, which you point out has a how many $100 billion budget in Afghanistan, and overall $600 billion, $500 billion.
Right. The joke is that you could fit every Foreign Service officer on one aircraft carrier. There are more people in the Army band than there are in the entire Foreign Service. That's the State Department.
So $50 billion budget for the State Department.
$600 billion plus.
And so the power that this general, whether it's Petraues or McChrystal, has versus the civilians who are supposed to be in charge in this country?
Sure. There's the structural problem in terms of just like the basic weight that the DOD has, so much so that even Secretary Gates has said, like, look, DOD has too much power. We need to give more power to the State Department. And if you go back and read, David Halberstam's Best and the Brightest, the State Department was where the action was at, in the 50s and 60s, and that sort of shifted to, I forget who I'm quoting here, but someone said, our defense policy is our foreign policy. So I think that those are very serious sort of structural issues. Plus, in Afghanistan, you have the sort of supreme allied commander. That's not the official title, which Petraues is now. And then on the diplomatic side, you have a number of like very, often in some cases talented diplomats. Sort of fighting over like, who is the strongest diplomatic voice. 4 or 5 people, and I think there's now a sense that has to be clarified. And I think that if there's a positive impact to the article, at least if they're going to do this crazy strategy, at least they might try to get it right.
I wanted to ask you, in all of the references, disparaging references to Obama administration officials, you noted that there was one official that they were laudatory of, Hillary Clinton, and that for some reason the McChrystal camp considered her a friend. Could you talk about that?
Sure. I mean, Secretary Clinton has had a very good relationship with Secretary Gates. Gates is a big McChrystal backer. I think Clinton's run-in with Petraeus in 2007 made her a little hesitant to appear in any way sort of anti-military, sort of anti-general. But also her policies have been pretty center-right. And so, you know, when the debate was going down, she disagreed with her ambassador, Eikenberry. She disagreed with Eikenberry and basically said, you know, give Stan what he wants. I think that's to build up her own defense credentials, but I think it's also I think that's what she believes.
Well, let's talk about Eikenberry, because this is a very significant split between McChrystal and the ambassador, also a general, a former retired general, Ambassador Eikenberry, and the cables that he sent that Dan Ellsberg has called the new Pentagon Papers that he sent to Hillary Clinton, but were leaked.
Right. Well, I think this is the most fascinating development, and the guy whose job is sort of most in the balance right now is Ambassador Eikenberry, because it wasn't just it's known as General McChrystal's strategy, but guess who was also writing that strategy? General Petraues. So yeah, I mean, it was a devastating critique. It was devastating. And if you go back, I recommend anyone to go back and read those cables to see probably what was the most prescient and scathing critique of the strategy we're pursuing. And the leak angered McChrystal's team beyond belief.
Explain what he said.
Well, General McChrystal said that he felt betrayed, and that this was a cable that was leaked to cover their flanks for the history books.
And what Eikenberry wrote.
And what Eikenberry wrote? Eikenberry wrote the strategy wasn't going to work, basically. I mean, and that Karzai would play the general off the ambassador, that we'd get stuck in this sort of he didn't use the word quagmire, I don't think, but essentially we'd get stuck going further and further into a mess.
And of course, in the days before the firing of General McChrystal, you had President Karzai come out and essentially back the general and urge, not directly, but tell President Obama that he thought that General McChrystal was doing a good job.
Right. I think New York Times columnist, the great Frank Rich, said, you know, having Hamid Karzai and his brother Ahmed Wali Karzai as your character witnesses was like having Rod, Blagovic as your to come to your defense. So I think that was very telling.
Your description of McChrystal with Karzai at Walter Reed Hospital,
yes,
and then General McChrystal trying to wake up President Karzai for the largest offensive in a year, that was Marja. Explain both situations.
I mean, devastating. Yeah, the day of the Marja operation, General McChrystal wanted to get President Karzai's sign-off. Essentially, the idea behind counterinsurgency is that you need a credible partner in government. Karzai is not a credible partner. So what do? You make him a credible partner. It's what we did with Prime Minister Maliki in Iraq. You will him by your support so he eventually becomes a credible partner, and he becomes what they call a commander-in-chief. So Karzai starts acting like the president. Now we see that from our perspective, where Karzai is dealing with a number of other political sort of dynamics, where he does not necessarily want to be responsible for Afghan civilians being killed. He does not necessarily want to be responsible. He wants sort of plausible deniability on a lot of these military operations. So yeah, the day before the day of this big offensive, General McChrystal wanted to get in touch with President Karzai. Calls over to his office. He won't. They won't let him through. He's taking a nap. He has a cold. Delay. And this is a huge operation they're about to launch. So finally, General McChrystal had to drive over with the Afghan defense minister and basically wake him up and say, look, this is your country. This is your country. Why don't you take charge of it? I mean, it really incredible. And then the Walter Reed scene was just sort of devastating. To have the President Karzai in Walter Reed meeting American soldiers and saying, like, wow, I didn't even know we were fighting in that province. I mean, what does that say? And McChrystal's people were very aware of Karzai's limitations, but they felt he was the only game in town.
Well, I mentioned earlier, you also write about General McChrystal in the case of Pat Tillman. He's the former NFL star who joined the military after 9/11 and was killed while serving in Afghanistan. The military initially said he died while charging up a hill toward the enemy to protect his fellow Army Rangers, but in fact, Tillman was killed by his own